Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the Razer Edge. This is another Android gaming handheld, and like many of the others we've looked at recently, Razer is really pushing this as a game streaming solution as opposed to a native Android gaming device. However, it does have a decent amount of processing prowess at its disposal. And so in this video, we're going to take a look at some Android gaming and emulation along with game streaming. Now, I do want to let you know in the interest of full disclosure that I paid for this with my own funds. However, we are going to be doing a Whatnot giveaway stream on February 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here in the United States. Whatnot is a live streaming auction platform that's a lot of fun, and they have reimbursed me for the cost of this so that I can give it away. So they are kind of sponsoring this video, I guess. And if you want to get in on the auction/giveaway that we're going to do, I've got some other tech gear to sell. You can go to Lon.TV/whatnot. That's my affiliate link, and they'll give you $15 to spend on the platform. And we'll be doing that again on Sunday, February 19th, 2023. Now, beyond that, no one else is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded, and all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. So let's get into it now and see what this device is all about. Now, the price point on this, as you see it, comes in at $400. There is a 5G version that costs a little bit more that you can get directly through Verizon at the time I'm recording this video, but this one is the Wi-Fi only version. Now, what this incorporates is the Razer Edge itself, which is the little tablet here. This is largely about the size of a phone. It's got a 6.8-inch full HD plus display running at 2400 by 1080 at 144 hertz. There are not many Android games that take advantage of this. However, the GeForce Now service from NVIDIA can push those higher frame rates, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. Now, the display is OLED, so you're going to have those nice contrast ratios, but it's a bit too wide for my taste. But you have the tablet here, and then the controller portion is actually a Razer Kishi V2 Pro, and this looks a lot like the Backbone controller, and it works pretty much like the one you would get for your mobile phone, where you slide the device in and then connect it up via the USB-C port here at the back to get everything up and running. The controller I found works pretty nicely. I'm not crazy about the travel on these buttons. They have very, very short travel, so it's a little too sensitive for me, but the rest of it feels okay. The D-pad is functional. The sticks feel pretty good. You've got analog triggers here along with shoulder buttons. You also have two bonus buttons here next to the analog triggers as well, and there is some haptic motors inside of it too, so you have kind of a nice game controller experience here for things that support those haptics. And of course, it connects up over USB-C. Now, on the bottom here, you have a headphone jack, and then you have a power pass-through, so you can plug it in while you're gaming on the handheld here. Now, the tablet itself actually doesn't have a headphone jack on it, so the only way you can get headphones plugged in short of Bluetooth is to connect it up to the Kishi here in order to get that working. Now, you'll notice there is a USB-C port here. That's how we were able to connect things up with the game controller a second ago. This does support video output, but only when you have it directly connected to the tablet portion. It does not pass video through when it's connected to the controller. And the problem is the wide aspect ratio of the display is what you're going to get. And as you can see, it was breaking up and lagging a bit as I was streaming into my video system here. So it's not quite ideal, I think, for docking and playing games. Hopefully there's some maybe firmware rectifiable issue that can resolve this, but it doesn't put it into the proper aspect ratio, unfortunately. So it's not ideal as a dockable solution, but many of its competitors are not supporting video output at all, so that was kind of nice to see here. Another gripe I have is that there's no biometrics on this, so even though it has a camera here in the front, you can't actually unlock the device with a Face ID, nor is there a fingerprint sensor on this either, so you're a bit limited in how quickly you can get into the device. Basically, you got to put your password in every time or do one of those drawing things to unlock the tablet itself. It is actively cooled, so there is a cooling fan that'll kick on if you're doing a lot of Android gaming that's stressing the processor. So it does remain pretty consistent in its performance, and we'll take a look at what it's able to accomplish on that front in a few minutes. And speaking of performance, this has a new Snapdragon processor on board, the G3X Gen 1, and I'll show you some performance comparisons in a little bit. Along with that processor, it has 6 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM. The 5G version has an extra 2 gigabytes for a total of 8. There's 128 gigabytes of onboard storage, but you do have the option to pop in an SD card over here, a micro SD card, and that will give you an additional 2 terabytes if you buy a card that big. So you should be able to store all your emulation stuff on here quite sufficiently. It has a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and I would put the battery life of this on par with other tablets of its kind running Android. So you could probably get 10 to 12 hours out of it if you're doing the basics. If you're running games natively on this, that's certainly going to eat the battery up a lot faster than if you were streaming games. So your mileage is going to vary dramatically, I think, depending on the activity. So bank on maybe 4 hours or so if you're doing Genshin Impact or some game that's really stressing the processor out, and a lot more if you're going to be streaming over a Wi-Fi network. And again, the different use cases here really vary up the battery life quite a bit on this one. Now, the front-facing webcam will do 1080p at 60 frames per second. The video looks okay, but it's certainly not going to rival a higher-end smartphone's front-facing camera. But if you have Google Meets or Zoom calls to do or something, you can certainly accomplish that task on the device here. Now, the tablet on its own weighs about 264 grams or 9.31 ounces. With the controller attached, it is 401 grams or 14.14 ounces. And because most of the weight is centered, it's distributed across your two hands here. And I found the overall package here to be very comfortable, but not all that different than a smartphone docked inside of a Razer Kishi device like this one. So let's get into some performance examples now. We're going to start with emulation. I've got Aether SX2, which is a PlayStation 2 emulator up here. And I am playing Burnout 3, and it runs great. In fact, it's running at the full frame rate, about 60 frames per second, and largely holding on to that. I've got everything at just the basic default settings here, so I'm sure we could tweak it further. I played a few other PS2 games that also seem to run pretty nicely on here as well. So I think from the standpoint of doing some relatively strenuous emulation, this should do pretty well here, at least certainly with the PS2. And this particular emulator is really nice on the Android platform. It's also available on the Apple M1 and M2 based devices, and it runs equally nicely there too. So let's take a look now at the Gamecube emulator called Dolphin. I've got Wave Race running on it right now. Let me continue my game here. And this one runs equally nice. By the way, the sound on both the PS2 and the Gamecube emulation here is pretty close to perfect. I'm not hearing anything breaking up. The gameplay feels really solid, and as you can see here, we're running at the full performance of this game. I tested a few other Gamecube games, and those also ran pretty well too. So I think this Snapdragon processor is pretty well suited for emulation. My gripe, though, is that the screen is so wide that older games like this one and the one we were playing before are in a pretty narrow portion of the screen. You've got some pretty large bezel space on the left and right. And even a 1080p 16:9 game is going to have some issues on this display, just given how wide it is. So I would have preferred them go with a screen aspect ratio that was better suited for gaming, because this is wide even by modern console standards. But all in, at least from a performance standpoint, it's performing pretty well. This emulator supports rumble controls, and I'm feeling the haptic motors on these Kishi sticks here really going. They're pretty noisy. I don't like the feel of them, to be honest with you, so that might be something I turn off. But if you are looking for rumble, this has it built in, and you can definitely hear it and feel it. So let's take a look at game streaming now. This, of course, will support the Xbox Cloud Gaming. I've got it running with GeForce Now. This is a service that NVIDIA provides to allow you to access some of your Steam, Epic, and Ubisoft games over their streaming servers. And what I like about GeForce Now is that it supports higher frame rates. So I've currently got it set above 60 hertz at the 120 hertz setting, and it seems to be working just fine here. Now, you do need a very solid Wi-Fi connection for this to work. I've got a Wi-Fi 6 access point up in the ceiling not far from me here, so that's why this is running as nicely as it is. The tablet does support Wi-Fi 6E, so if you have a good access point kind of in the room or very close to where you're located, along with not a lot of other things using the Wi-Fi, I think you'll have a good experience here streaming games. That little lag hit there was just the game loading. It usually does that when you leave a planet's atmosphere here. But all in, it feels like a pretty solid streaming solution. But remember, we're running this at 1080p, so we do have some extra screen real estate on the left and right hand side of the image here. But it does appear to be running north of 60 frames per second and very, very fast and responsive here. So a good experience for game streaming as well, in addition to its emulation. Let's take a look now, though, at native Android gaming and some of the things we can do with that. So here is Genshin Impact, and as you can see, it runs pretty nicely on here. The game looks great. The quality level is certainly a lot nicer than it would be on a lower-end phone. But you'll notice the controls don't work with this game because this game, believe it or not, on Android doesn't support game controllers. Now, the Kishi has a feature that allows you to simulate the touchscreen with the game controls here, but it stopped working on me. I got it working last night. Now it's not working. It keeps trying to ask for permissions. I grant the permissions, then it craps out again. So it's just not polished yet, and there's something wrong with it. When I did have it working, I found it was very difficult to get the controls to overlay on top of the on-screen controls in a way that worked, especially when it came to panning the camera around here. So for games that don't support game controllers natively, there is sort of a workaround, but it's not working very reliably. And when you do get it to work, it's not ideal. But the performance is certainly there on the Android side for running native games on this device beyond just game streaming. But I don't know if the ecosystem is all that friendly to game controllers at the moment. And on the 3D Mark Wildlife Benchmark test, we got a score of 5,759. That's well above what we saw out of the Logitech G handheld we looked at a few weeks ago. And the Logitech G I actually like quite a bit because it was primarily focused on game streaming, and I thought it actually did that task quite well. It didn't need a very fast processor for it. And the Logitech device has a 16:9 display, so you didn't have this awkward super wide display that isn't really utilized by any of the game streaming services. That said, the performance here is very good for emulation, and if you are someone who does a lot of handheld Android emulation, this might be something to look at. But if you've got a nice smartphone, you can get the Kishi for that and not have to buy another device. Additionally, the Steam Deck starts at the same price this one does and is a better emulation handheld along with the PC gaming functionality that it offers. So I have a hard time recommending this one based on its price and its attributes, but I would love to hear what you have to say down in the comments below. The unboxing video I did on this one got a lot of discussion, and I'm sure we're going to have quite a bit on this one as well. So leave those comments down below, and until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Chris Allegretta, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Logic KGR, Tom Albrecht, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.